this year I started taking some Bible study courses at a Bible college, an online one, fortunately, and I had the opportunity to start taking part in some preaching at my church. And as I was getting involved in this new area, this new ministry, I realized that I wanted a system that would help me prepare sermons, help me get things in place, collect my notes, collect everything that I wanted and stay organized, because I didn't know if this would be something I'd be doing a lot, something I'd do a little. And also, I'm the kind of person who likes to have a system in place, so that I know things are going to work through, that I won't forget things, because naturally I'm quite a disorganized person who's very forgetful. So if I have a system, I know that I will tick all the boxes and make sure that nothing slips through the gaps. So I had also been hearing about this new application called Notion, which seemed really interesting to me, but at the same time it seems so overwhelming. I think I tried it out sometime last year, but the fact that they give you just this almost blank template or these stock templates, which just didn't really seem right for me. But with this new area, with this new function, it seemed like a really great test case to try out Notion, to set up a system where I could track my sermons, where I could put down notes from sermons, include everything there, and use that in other areas. So I started to devise my own system. I actually consulted some friends to see what they were doing. I thought I'd show you what I came up with, what my Notion system looks like. Now, just a quick overview of Notion. Notion is a kind of note-taking app, but it's also a planning and organization app. This makes it different from something like Evernote, where you have notes as your core item. In Notion, you can have just plain notes, which also follow sort of Markdown, but block organization, kind of like a Gutenberg editor for WordPress. So you can do that, but you can also do databases and have pages within those databases. And those databases can be displayed in different ways. So one of the most common ways is to have just a simple table view. So here I've got my sermons in a table view, and you can see like you have a name for it, you can have an attached file, you can have an area, and if you click on each one, then you can go into the specific page for that one. And on the page, you can make edits. So here you see that each line is its own item, and so you can then choose what you want here. Plain text, add a page, to-do list, different types of headings, different sizes, lists, numbered lists, toggle lists so you can hide the content, quotes, linked pages, call-outs, and some other inline mentioning things, or even having a whole other database within it. So a table is the most basic view, but there are other views that you can have, and this is where it becomes really useful for organizing, because you can look at information through a different lens depending on your need. So the reason why this makes Notion such a great choice for sermon planning is because you can choose layouts that help you view sermons that you have coming up in terms of their progress or the date, as well as looking at a back catalogue based on different areas and different topics that you prepared. And you can then link to other resources that you save. You can find something interesting online, save it for later, or you can come up with an analogy that you might want to use in a sermon someday, but not sure which day, save that into Notion, and then come back to it later. Now, there are other choices, there are other ways to do this. You could use a combination of applications, one that helps you with the planning and one that helps you with saving notes and saving ideas. That's quite a common system. So you might use something like Todoist as your planning tool, or Trello to plan, and then you might use something like Evernote or Apple Notes as your system for saving those notes for later. Or you could use one of these more interesting new note-taking applications with the bi-directional linking, like Roam, which seems really fascinating. But I chose Notion for this purpose. So let's take a look. Now I've got here an example database, and this is an example one because I didn't want to reveal any personal information. My actual database has everything in there. I originally started off trying to do separate databases for separate areas, but in the end I combined them all into one using the power method. And so I'll give you an example, or I'll show you how the power method looks like in this area called data. So what you want to do is create a central database where you have all of your projects, all of your resources, all of your tasks, and all of your area. And this comes from what PARA stands for. PARA stands for projects, areas, resources, and archive. So in Notion you can archive things just by hiding them or filtering them out. So we don't need that part. Although the word PARA starts with projects, the area I usually look at first is areas. And that's because these are kind of the top level groupings of everything else. So here I've got church, which is where I keep all the sermon things. I could add a new area which would be family, and that would have things related to my family. Another one for work, another one for, let's say, a certain hobby that I have. And then projects would be a specific group of tasks within an area. So object will be a sermon that you have to prepare. So let's say you know that you have a sermon on Genesis 1 coming up. That would be a project. And then resources are things that you may want to use in a project or later on. Now, this is a centralized database where everything should go. So you don't really want to interact with this by itself. Instead, what you want to do is you want to create perhaps a specific sermon planning database, or you could have a church-specific database. I quite like having a separate sermon section, but you may not do that. So in my sermon planning section here, I've started with projects at the top, and I have created a Kanban view. This is using the board layout, which I find to be one of the most useful. And I have some filters going on. So my filter here is to only show items in the area which is church. So this will only show sermons. Now I could do this in a different way as well, whereby I could maybe make a tag that I would apply to all sermons, and that tag would say only show, and then have a filter only show items containing the tag sermons. And each item has certain properties. So as you can see here, there's a multi-select which shows the progress. So this is the tags. It's called tags, but I actually need to change that name. So this one is a multi-select. And here I can choose whether I'm preparing the sermon, whether the sermon's ready, or whether it's been delivered. So this lets me know, have I preached it or whatever. Another important aspect is the preaching date, because you want to know when it's coming up. And then I can attach resources to it as well, so that I can access those resources later if there's perhaps a particular some Bible commentary that I find, or a verse. I may want to put that there. And you can see it's tagged to the area. And then files, I could add a file, perhaps audio recording of the sermon once it's been delivered. And below I can just add notes to it. Now the great thing, of course, about using Notion is I can then change this view to be a calendar. So I can see also the particular dates and plannings for when sermons are coming up and what things are there. So I can switch between those two views, deadlines, but also like the progress tracking of it. And then I've added below a resources area. So there's a lot of similarities here that you got. For example, I also use here, but this one isn't a this one's a multi-select tag, so I can have multiple tags rather than just a singular selecting one. So if I want to show how, I could find an image like this which shows an example of a letter, modern letter style. Add this in here. Paste that. Of course, because I paste that one down. Yes, so now it's pasting the image in. So if epistles, or if I'm teaching I want to bring this up and show like style of a letter and compare how it's different to a modern one. So then I may want to add in, something which highlights the way that Paul wrote letters, the way that we had the style of a formal letter back then, where you have prayer and thanksgiving rather than and you start with the person who's sending rather than the sender. So you can see that using the tag, that can help me whenever I come to prepare one of these things later. I can also attach it to a project. Now maybe later on I'll decide that I need more tags here. I can do that as well. The other aspect which is really great is I can save any notes that I create from personal study or from formal study as using a specific template if I want, and layout, and access those really quickly. I'm not going to show them today. I'll show that on another occasion, but those also go into my resources area so I can access them whenever I'm preparing. So this is just a quick overview of how I've set up a system. It's still a work in progress. I'm sure I'll develop it further in the future. I'd love to know if you're using Notion for sermon planning, if you've done anything different, if you've done anything similar, what you like, any ideas or opportunities you see. Thanks for watching.